Hello, my name is Nazareth Rodriguez, and today I will be presenting my Tableau project for my Information Systems Management class. Okay, so this project consists of receiving a set of data and creating a whole Tableau workbook to be able to visualize that data. The data that I received represented the sales and costs of an insurance company in the year 2019. It showed me the salespeople, the states that they were selling in, the dates of the sale, the different insurances, their prices, and their costs. So the thing with insurance is that it is a prepaid expense for the customer. So we aren't going to see a negative profit from this information. What we have to look for instead are for areas that have low profitability and the reasons for it. In order to measure that profitability, we will be using the contribution margin, which are our sales minus our expenses, and our contribution margin ratio, which shows us how the contribution margin will be affected by our level of sales activity. Okay, so what I first want to identify are the salespeople, the types of insurance they're selling, and who is the most profitable among them. So in our first worksheet, I made this bar chart to show me the salespeople at the bottom, what type of insurance they are selling, and how much of it are they selling. As you can see, I color coded the insurances, and the length of the color tells me which insurance is the most profitable. From this, I can tell the professional insurance is the most profitable since it is the longest color I see. Life insurance, on the other hand, is the least profitable, and the salesperson with the highest contribution margin is Paul. So now I have to discover why Paul is the most profitable and see if we can share the same insight to people like Christian. All right, so my next worksheet shows the location where the salespeople are selling and their contribution margin in each state. As you can see, I use the map feature to easily visualize each location. Each salesperson has a color assigned to them. However, I want to find Paul. My guess is that Paul probably sells in a high populated area state like New York, California, or even Florida. But to my surprise, Paul is actually selling in 6 different states, 3 states in the Northeast region and 3 states from the West. I don't know how he does it. Maybe he does it by selling online or through the phone, but somehow he is able to keep those variable costs low. All right, since we identified our salespeople and where they're selling, now I want to know if there is a specific time where sales are at their peak. In this next worksheet, I used the line graph to help me discover the trends throughout the months of 2019. Again, salespeople are at the top. I have my contribution margin on my left axis, and I have my months at the bottom. I also have a filter that helps me see the insurance types and helps me view the trend of the profit of each insurance throughout the months. From the looks of it, each salesperson had a different peak. There was no one month or period where the profits overall were peaking, so the information is kind of scattered throughout the months. Okay, so my next worksheet is the median contribution margin by state. Why did I use median? So I went to take a quick look at the prices of the insurance. I found that there was like a wide range of prices, and I knew that if I were to use average, my prices would have been skewed. So using median would help me find the perfect midpoint price that we can use as a starting point or a guide. I have my map once again. I have my insurance filter. I have my scale right here. So the higher the contribution margin, the darker the color that I see on the map. I also have this neat slider that, which is probably my favorite feature that I've learned to use. You slide it to the month you want to see the contribution margin, and you see the data for that respective month. I also have my labels for my contribution margin, and I have my labels for my contribution margin ratio. I can point to a state and the information would show in that white dialog box. I did the same graphic, but for median price and variable cost. Okay, so from what I am seeing, the states are pretty even throughout. However, there is a bit of a contrast between the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast region of the US. So let's check that out. My next worksheet is a close-up of the median contribution margin in the Northeast region and the median contribution margin in the Mid-Atlantic. As you can see, there's a big contrast between the two regions in the overall contribution margin. However, their contribution margin ratio are all in the 70s range. So let's check out how the prices and the costs differ from each state. My next worksheet is a bar chart comparing the prices and the cost and the contribution margin between the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast regions. As you can see, my measures are color-coded. I have a filter for my insurance and my favorite feature, the date slider. Overall, I can see why the Mid-Atlantic would yield such a high contribution margin because the prices of the insurance were higher than the variable costs to sell them. The variable costs in both regions are more or less the same throughout. Okay, so I went back to the previous sheet to compare the contribution margin and the contribution margin ratio. As we mentioned, our least profitable insurance is the life insurance. So let's see what effect it has on the contribution margin if we just take it away. I am going to click on the life insurance on the filter to deselect it, and boom. The overall effect is that increases contribution margin. However, our contribution margin ratio decreases overall. Our contribution margin ratio tells us the rate at which our contribution margin will increase as sales increase. For example, if sales increase 73%, our contribution margin and net operating income will increase by 73 cents per dollar. So this decrease of the contribution margin ratio will slow our increase in profit. Okay, so I would like to see this effect, but on a bar and a line graph. The bars over here represent the contribution margin and the lines represent the contribution margin ratio. So this graph presents that information for each state in those two regions. And the months at the bottom are represented by numbers. When I deselect life insurance, we have a drop in contribution margin ratio throughout the graph. So let's select life insurance again and see what states during the month can benefit from decreasing sales of life insurance. The first state with a drop is Connecticut. So that's a state that I would look into. See what other states. Massachusetts has a pretty low contribution margin ratio, so I would look into that state as well. And oh wow, here's Pennsylvania with a big drop, but it has a peak right here in August, so we can check that out as well. Okay, so I have my 3 states here to work on. It's the same graph as before, except we're focusing on these 3 states so we can closely see the difference between the 3. So watch what happens when I deselect life insurance again. The contribution margin ratio drops in a lot of months, so I'm going to put this worksheet on a dashboard later so we can work on it further. Okay, so my first dashboard view are my sales agents and their locations here at the bottom. My second dashboard are the sales trend for each salesperson and the insurance. My third dashboard are the maps for median contribution margin, price, and cost. My fourth dashboard focuses on the two regions and the comparison between the prices, the variable costs, and the contribution margin. My fifth and final dashboard are the two regions that we're analyzing for the effect of deselecting life insurance. After that, we put all of our dashboards into our Tableau story. And as you can see, we put all of our information in the same order as mentioned. Takes a while to load, but it's all there. So on our last page, we have a text description here that shows us what we're going to be looking at. So it says, we analyze if we should keep putting effort in selling life insurance in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast region. We will use contribution margin and contribution margin ratio as a factor. And at the bottom, we have our regular values. So I excluded like some months or some times where it really showed a big difference, or like, for example, like the little drop we had here in Connecticut for July. Here we have, you'll see once we deselect life insurance, but here, as you can tell, the contribution margin ratio is the same throughout. And here, this is where it shows us that big drop Pennsylvania had and the peak it had over here. So watch what happens when we deselect life insurance. Look what happens to our contribution margin and to our contribution margin ratio. So I'm going to deselect life insurance right here using my filter. And here, our overall contribution margin increased here for the month of July. Here, as we can tell, the contribution margin ratio, this red line here, stayed the same. It also stayed the same for here in Connecticut, but here, Massachusetts, it stayed the same except for when we get to November. However, the contribution margin for November increased 64%. So even though our contribution margin ratio dropped, our contribution margin for November increased a lot. So that is probably a consideration we should think about. And also our contribution margin increased for the month of March in Pennsylvania. However, the ratio stayed the same. However, our peak had dropped a little from 80 to 78%, but our contribution margin ratio decreased, or our contribution margin increased during the month of August. But the contribution margin ratio stayed the same in the month of March. So these are the effects that really has really the overall effect of decreasing efforts of selling life insurance in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic regions. Even though it's not providing much profit, it is providing a bit of profit, but we can also save some costs from selling life insurance that will really help the overall insurance company in general. And it helps the company wide. So that way it'll be in the best interest to decrease the efforts from selling the life insurance. I really had fun, or I really enjoyed using Tableau. You can use it for so many things, and especially presenting data in such a professional manner. I do see myself using this application throughout like my academic and my professional career, and I really learned a lot from it. So thank you for taking the time of watching this video, and I hope you have a nice day.